My name is Francois Gautier. I have the privilege to live in your country for a long time. I say privilege because many Indians feel that, they want to go abroad, they want to immigrate. But I'm a guy who came here and is happy to be here and grateful to be here in this country because there are so many great things in your country. Regardless of, what's your religion, from which part of India you come from, this is a great country with a great past and a great future, whatever the problems India is facing today. Now, I'm not an Indologist really. I'm a journalist and a writer, and even that by accident. I came to India very young. I wanted to go around the world, and there was a caravan of cars driving from Paris to Pondicherry. You all know Pondicherry? So I thought, okay, this is a good way to start my journey around the world and become a man and, experience the world. And so I took this caravan, not intending to stay in India, knowing nothing about India, nothing about Indology, not interested at all. And then I came to Delhi. It takes, in those days, you had to cross many countries, from France to Germany to Austria, Greece, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then we came to Delhi. And in Delhi, I spent a night in the Shurabino ashram in Delhi. Some of you might know this now. It's a big college. Those days it was a small house. And I felt that there was a knowledge in this country, that there was something very special in this country which people call India. So my interest in India started there. Then I became a journalist. I had done some journalism before leaving France. I became a journalist and a photographer, and I covered Kashmir. In the 90s, Kashmir was at its worst. There was a lot of curfew and a lot of killings, and I went, from the Pakistan side, from Indian side. I spent time with the Indian army. I spent time with the militants. I saw the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits who became refugees in their own country, and I started studying Indian history. This is a time where I thought, this is a complicated country, and I started studying Indian history. And of course, if you study Kashmir, if you study Indian history, then you come upon Aurangzeb. Now, Aurangzeb is a much hated or much loved figure of Indian history, but very central, because probably he was the most powerful man in the world. He had the most powerful army. India, in spite of many invasions, was still the richest country in the world, where there were practically no beggars. So I started studying Aurangzeb, and then from Aurangzeb, of course I'm a French, so French are all lovers of Napoleon. You all know about Napoleon. Napoleon is the Shivaji Maharaj of our country. But he's very respected and very well known in India. If you're a kid, you study Napoleon. I was born near his museum. Those of you who know Paris, there's a museum of the Napoleon in the Invalides in the central Paris. I was born next to that. So I knew about Napoleon. And when I came upon Shivaji Maharaj, I realized that this man, with a few hundred people, in the central of India, not many means, he stood against the most powerful man in the world at that time, Mr. Aurangzeb. And when Shivaji was born, Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire was still at its peak. When Shivaji died at the age of 52, the Mughal Empire started to crumble and never recovered. From the time of Shivaji's death, the Mughal Empire started to crumble and never recovered, neither its glory nor its power. So, that was very interesting. And I thought, look at this guy, Shivaji. He was a great administrator. He was a very secular man, contrary to what is said in your Indian history books, He never harmed the women, the wives, and the daughters of his enemies. He respected, Sufi temples, Muslim mosques, He was an uncorrupt man. He lived very simply, Whatever he got, he administered. He created the first navy in India. Extraordinary man, and a man of vision, a man of spirituality, great spirituality. Though he was a profound Hindu, he had respect for every religion. And yet, in my country, France, Napoleon has got such a good place, such an important place. Every year there are books and films and treatises about him. Some of his laws are still used in France today. But Shivaji doesn't have the same rank here in your country, in India. In some books he's described as a plunderer, of course because he plundered Surat, but he needed the money for his army, And in some books, he's got 3-4 lines, he's the guy who's, he's a pan-national Indian. So that's one of my first surprises as a, student of Indology was, that some of your heroes and heroines, neither have place in your own history books nor in the foreign history books. Now, the second description, of course, Indology. Max Müller is the first Indologist, of renown, and it is true that, though he didn't speak Sanskrit, he was a great knowledge, he was very knowledgeable about India, about the Vedas, So he's the first Indologist, And then I discovered also one gentleman called Mortimer Wheeler. Mortimer Wheeler, you know about Mortimer Wheeler? He's the father of Indian archaeology, and he's also an Indologist. He's the father also of the Aryan invasion theory. Now, you all know about the Aryan invasion theory? According to that theory, which today is defunct, by the way, most historians, including Romila Thapar and all, the famous Indian historians, have taken the distance from it. I've said, it may not have happened. But according to this theory, which is still the foundation of all Indology and all your history books, white-skinned people, came from the West. Some people say from Russia, from the Ural Mountains. They came to India. They conquered India in a very bloody manner, and they imposed upon the Dravidians and the tribals who were living in the north, the caste system, the Hindu religion, And so the people from the north and the tribals slowly retreated, back to the south, And they say today that the original inhabitants of India are the tribals and the Dravidians. So many, many yogis and seers like Swami Vivekananda or Sri Aurobindo have said time and again that it is not possible, that it never happened. Now it is proved scientifically. There is an exhibition actually in Pune where, from a scientific point of view, it is shown that this Aryan invasion never happened. And actually, it is Indian who went, westwards, towards Iran, where, the Zarathustra religion is an influence from India, and even towards the Greece. There are a lot of influence, of the Vedanta and Vedic civilization in Greece, and there have been some French authors who have done entire books about that. And even further, to Europe, where the Celtic culture has some Vedanta and Vedic influence. So I came upon these Westerners, and the beginning of Indology, and I realized that there are two problems with ancient Indology, the first Indology. One is that Western Indology, because Indology today is in the hands of Westerners, whether it was, Max Müller, whether it's today, Mr. Witzel in America, or Mr. Jaffrelot in France, or Mr. Pinceau in Norway. They have always had a superiority complex, that although I am fascinated, by Sanskrit, by the complexity of Sanskrit, by the knowledge that is there in the Vedas, you can't miss it, if you read the Vedas or read the Bhagavad Gita, there is a knowledge there, there is a knowledge which is eternal, which is today is even relevant. So these people were fascinated by that. At the same time, they had an unconscious feeling probably that, okay, my civilization, the Judeo-Christian civilization is superior. We still need to teach Indians, what are the true values of democracy, of literacy. And it is still true today. It is still true today that Indology is still in the hands of Westerners, who most of the time live in their countries. Now, if you take my country, the most famous Indologist is called Christophe Jaffrelot. I don't know how many of you know about him. You know, he comes to India maybe 2 months a year. They live in their home countries, you know. It is impossible to study India if you do not live in India. I have lived in India for nearly 50 years. I have crisscrossed India, from Arunachal Pradesh, the Tibetan border to, Kanyakumari, and I can't claim that I know India fully yet. It's a very complex country, From every state there are different customs, different languages, different food customs. It's a very complex country. You cannot study India in depth unless you live in this country. The second problem is what is called philology. I don't know how many of you know philology. Philology means that you study something, but you keep your distance. This is the basis of, Western Indology, that I cannot identify myself with something which may be below my dignity or may be foreign to me. So I keep a distance. No, so this is fine, if you study dead civilization like Egypt. Egypt was once a great civilization, or Greece. Greece was once a great civilization. This is fine, but to study India, which is a living civilization, because this knowledge, which existed in the Vedas, who am I, what happens when I die, what is karma, what is dharma, what is an avatar, it's still alive today. In spite of so many invasions, so much trauma that happened to this country, to every community. Every community has suffered from invasion and colonization. This knowledge is still alive. So you cannot study this knowledge sitting on your ass in Paris or in New York. It is not possible. It is not possible. Now, if you want to study Sanskrit, if you really want to study Sanskrit, not only the language, but what is behind Sanskrit, you need to go to temples, you need to mix up with Brahmins, you need to go in places where Sanskrit is spoken. You need to merge and identify yourself. You cannot keep a distance. If you want to study temples, because there are many Westerners who study temples or Hinduism, you need to merge, you need to go to Benares, you need to, go to temples, you need to participate in pujas, you cannot study temples unless you know what is a puja. You get the feeling of a puja, unless you go to all the great ancient temples, whether it's Meenakshi, whether it's Kedarnath, and you get a feeling of, a temple is a very special place, like a church is in the West, you enter a very ancient churches, and you get an atmosphere, you get an experience. In the same way, you cannot study temples of India unless you spend years studying temples. Now, the first problem of modern philology is that keeping a distance. The second problem is the negativity of the subjects. Now, there's one thing that Indologists in the West are obsessed with. I give you one guess. Caste, If you do a search, when I started writing books on Indian history, on Indology, if you do a search in Google French Google, on caste, you find 1.2 million hits. 1.2 million hits of people who have done studies on caste, written articles, written books, written entire theses on caste. Now, I know that caste is still an important phenomenon in India, but India since 1947 has been trying to go beyond caste. Isn't it true? Every government, whether it's Congress or BJP, has got that aspiration, that we elevate the lower caste and we start to think beyond caste, And yet there is an obsession, which is still there today. Every time I read an article in France on India, and this is very rare, This is another problem with Indology, that India doesn't interest much the West unless there are big problems, big catastrophes, or huge elections. Then you hear about India in the US or in France. Otherwise, you don't hear about India. But when it comes to caste, wow, there are articles and articles, and how there are the Brahmins, the devils of this country. The Brahmins have been demonized, so much in the West, and by Indologists, And yet, if you look at Brahmins today, and I did a study on Brahmins, they're a minority. In places like Tamil Nadu, they've been chased by the Dravidian movement. They emigrated all over the world, You find them in New York, find them in Paris, you find them in Delhi, so many Brahmins in Delhi, like Mr. Manishankar Haraya, who speaks good French, by the way. He speaks good French. He was a consul in Belgium for a long time. So, obsession about caste, that's a second problem. Now, in France, for instance, the foremost, I'm not saying they're not academic, most Indologists are very academic, They can speak scientifically about caste for, page after page, hour after hour, They are knowledgeable about India, but they don't have the right opinion upon India. In my country, Mr. Jaffrelot is the foremost Indologist. You cannot escape him, because every time there is an election, every time there is some catastrophe, every time there's something to say about, he's there in the newspapers, on the TV, he's everywhere. They have a hold, they have a monopoly on what is said about India in France, or in the US, or in Norway, anywhere in the world. And they keep that monopoly. So Mr. Jaffrelot has spent an entire lifetime demonizing Hindus and caste and, clashes between Hindus and Muslims. We know that there are clashes, we know that, but I have lived in India so long. India is a safe country, I have lived so many years. I have reported on India in the most unlikely place. Everybody talks about Ayappa. I've been to Ayappa 2-3 times. I've been to the Tibetan border. I've been to Kashmir so many times. I have never been asked about my passport. If you're a foreigner in Paris, it's likely that sooner or later, especially if you're not dressed properly, someone will ask about your passport. I have never been mugged in India. I've been in the most dangerous place. I've never been mugged in India. India is a safe place, Same thing is true about women, Indologists speak about the sad condition of women in India, whether it is sati, which is a very, very, very rare phenomenon, since independence, whether it's, dowry, whether it's, bride burning, whether it's rape, Of course, there have been horrible rapes which have been meditated a lot, But if you look at statistics, India is far behind in terms of rapes, Countries like US and Sweden. I think Sweden is a place in the world where there are most rapes, I was talking the other day about Benazir Bhutto, because I interviewed Benazir Bhutto 2-3 times, She was in a country where, men are in the front, And yet, every time I interviewed her, she was sitting down, and all the men were bowing down, standing, to her. There is a respect for women in India. I'm married to an Indian, so I can speak, a little bit with experience, There is the first prime minister in the world was Indira Gandhi. She ruled India for nearly 20 years, And, Benazir Bhutto was the prime minister, and in Bangladesh they had, prime ministers, since last 20 years, So there's a bit of contradiction, and Indologists never speak about the positive aspects of India. Because, of course, there are caste problems, of course there are rapes, of course there are huge problems in this country. I love India, but I'm not blind to the problems of corruption, of ecology, But it's also such an ancient country. There is so much knowledge, This knowledge is gone from the world. And I keep saying that in all my talks, that I'm proud to be in India. Indians need to be proud of themselves, of their culture, of their knowledge, without being blind to their faults. Now, because time is going to run out soon, what is needed is that Indians take back Indology from the Westerners. I'm a Westerner. I'm brought up a Catholic. My father was a staunch Catholic. My uncle was a parish priest in Paris, in Montmartre. I don't know how many of you know Paris. He was a parish priest of Montmartre. But I have to say that Indians are not proud enough to be Indians. And this is why Indology is not in your hands. So you there... You live in India, You are the one who are nearest to this knowledge about Indians. You are the one who can talk best about the good and the bad, the pros and the cons, what is the essence of Indology. So you need to take it back from Westerners. But for this, you need two things. One is you need to rewrite your own history, because Indian history has been written by the Britishers, by Max Muller, and it's been post-dated. We know now, if you study the latest discoveries, you will see that Indian history is much older than it is said. The Vedas are much older than 1500 before Christ. There was civilization in India at least 10,000 years old. So you need to rewrite Indian history and get rid of the Aryan invasion theory, which has divided India like anything. Between Brahmins and Dalits, between Hindi-speaking and Tamil-speaking people, between white and darker people. What? You're all Indians, all of you are Indians. I keep shuttling between Delhi and Pondicherry and Bangalore and Pune, this is India, And the second thing is, you need to change your education, because you're making clones of your children. You're only teaching them, Western knowledge, whether it's mathematics, whether it's history, and you're making clones out of them. They have no roots, Other Frenchmen, I was taught to be proud to be French. My poetry, my heroes, Napoleon, But it's not so in India, Kalidasa, who's probably one of the best poets ever in the world, Even translated from the Sanskrit, Kalidasa's poetry shines like anything. He's not taught in Indian school. Your philosophers, the Buddhist philosophy, which was, so advanced for its time, not taught. Vedic mathematics, so advanced for its time, not taught. Sri Aurobindo, who was such a profound philosopher and revolutionary, not taught. So, no wonder that in the West people know so little about India, have so many prejudices, because in your own schools, in your own books, you do not emphasize the greatness of your civilization. So this is the thing, this would be my conclusion, is that you need to take back Indology from Westerners. Okay, there can be Westerners who are friendly, but you need to take back Indology from them. And for that, you need to rewrite your own history books, and you need to change your education. I know it's a big program. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm more happy to answer them. I have 6 minutes? Okay, I have 6 minutes for question.
Thank you. I have a question, which is, you told us how India does history. I'd like to know how other countries do history. Let me first pose the problem for you. The problem is, whose India are we talking about? There is a colonist India, there's a Dalit India, there's a Muslim India, there's a Brahminical India. Everything you spoke so far seems to be from a Brahminical India, which is mainstream. Whose India are we talking about? The thing with history is that we're talking about the past. India is an ongoing culture. So these dynamics are there today. We are asking the question of who gets power. There is a
Are you asking a question or making a statement?
Yes. I'm contextualizing the question. And the second thing is that when you said that in France you learn about your history, isn't there an attempt to, I don't know, history is a selective writing. So what history do we teach our children?
No, so I think, question is completely, out of order, because first, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm a Frenchman. I'm a born Frenchman, educated Catholic, so I cannot be accused of a bias. Most people repeat what their parents say, what the teachers say. I'm not repeating I repeat what I've experienced, rightly or wrong. Secondly, colonization has divided India. It's divided in India, between, in Kerala, I've studied Christianity in Kerala, before the Portuguese came, Christians in Kerala were integrated, they remained Christians, but they were integrated with the other communities around them, Muslims were integrated, if you look at the Aga Khan Muslims today, the Ahmadi Muslim, they're much more integrated than other Muslims, so it is the British and the colonizers, who have divided India, and fortunately at independence, Mr. Nehru, adapted everything from the British, the education system, the judicial system, the democratic system, and it's a catastrophe, I mean, your question is a catastrophe.
Yeah. Since you said that you have been to Pondicherry many times. Here.
Yeah, ma'am.
I would like to ask you, what do you think of the kind of work that is being done in the Indology department of the Institut Français de Pondicherry?
Wonderful job. Wonderful job, because they have scholars there, so Indian scholars.
Yeah. So in your talk today, what do you think they can do to promote what you would like in terms of spreading Indology by Indians? Because as you know, most of the work is done, it's funded by the French government.
Yes, that's one of the very few. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and many of the workers are French.
Absolutely.
Of course, they've got Indian students, they've got pundits.
Absolutely.
So what is the kind of thing in today's talk, in the context of your today's talk?
No, that's it. Indologists should come to India and work with Indians, of equal status, not scribes. And I think the French Institute has done that, but they're one of the very few. I don't know if you know more, but they're one of the very few who have done that.
Sure, I'll be quick.
Yeah.
Sir, postmodernists and neo-Orientalists are the greatest obstructionists for Indology to progress in the right direction.
Right.
Because they completely demystify national and cultural integration, and they want the absolute truth to be considered as an arrogant pretense. How would you like to address this issue, and isn't this the greatest challenge for Indology to progress in the right kind of direction?
Yeah, no, but the answer is in your question. I think we need to, as Madam said, you need to work. Indologists need to work, in India, with scholars of India, and slowly, the domination will go from the West to India, and so this is a very good question. Okay. We started 3 minutes late. Hello, miss. We started 3 minutes late. I have 3 minutes, 4 minutes more. Yeah?
So I had a question here. Here.
What are you?
Right in front.
Yeah, sorry.
So you've obviously done a lot of work trying to get Indology in a better state. So, and you found a lot of challenges. I've been following you on Twitter and your work. So when you're telling us to kind of go about and be proud of our country and change the narrative, what are some of the suggestions you can give us about, like obviously you face challenges. So if you can talk about that and what you think we will face.
See, if you take women, there are many heroines, in India, before their time, like we have Jeanne d'Arc in France, but in India you have, hundreds of them, Chenama and Ahilyabai of Indore, and of course the Rani of Jhansi. There are so many great, Indian women. So they should be known to your children, and then your heroes, I started a small museum in Pune, because I thought that there's something that lasts longer than my books. So there is a gentleman called Maharana Pratap, is the only Rajput who stood to the Mughals. All the other Rajputs either gave their daughters in marriage or submitted. Maharana Pratap, like Shivaji Maharaj, lived simply, never lived in a palace. He was a very just guy. He's the only guy who actually stood to the Mughals, and he fought Akbar. He fought Akbar and held his ground in Adilgati. But he's not taught, outside of the North, Delhi and Rajasthan, he's not known. Why? He's a great hero. My country, France, he would be honored. So you need your children to know their heroes without being blind to the problem that India faced. So you have to change the entire education, especially in history books. And then you'll produce children who feel, oh, I'm proud to be Indian, because I see Indians and Hindus in US, for instance, and in the university, there are a great number of Indian students. The only thing they want to do is merge in the American, system and, become Americans and more American than the Americans. They do not project any Indianness. It's important if you're an Indian, whether you're Muslim or Hindu or Christian, that you project some Indianness, that you're a different person. So if you do project that Indianness, even if the US or UK or Canada, something is shining and you're giving out something while taking, you might take from the US, but you're giving back something. Instead, these people just merge in the US, and Indians become more, American than the Americans, and they're terrible.
Hello. What do you
question.
think about organizations like the Infinity Foundation, the work of Rajiv Malhotra,
of course,
Sanjeev
of course.
Sharma, who are trying to rewrite the history of Indology
What are
and
you?
project it from
What are you? Oh, okay, hi.
projected from an Indian's perspective? How much of it is being sort of
No,
brought
but
forward?
Rajiv Malhotra is a pioneer, Unfortunately, there are not so many defenders of Indianness, but he's a pioneer, and, he gave a lot, I think he spent his entire fortune, on this, and now he's a little tired, and, so he's one of the few pioneers. But of course, I met him a few times, and he interviewed me, and we're all grateful to him, but there's not enough of these people. There should be more Indians who rise up and say, okay, I know the faults of my country, but I'm proud to be Indian, and I want to work to change this country, because India is at a crossroad now. It needs to be changed, people want to divide India between Muslims and Hindus, but, if you give a feeling of pride to everybody, whichever your religion is, it's going to solve the problem to a great extent. But instead, you have people who want to divide India more between, Dravidians and Aryans and, and Dalits and, Brahmins. Oh man, I'm so tired of it.
Sir, this Western Indology, or the Western view of Indology, where is this getting funded from?
Yeah, you see, in France it's interesting because the French government is funding Christophe Jaffrelot. There is this like Nehru University, GNU. In France there is an institute which does research on all kinds of subjects, And the Indology department, headed by Jaffrelot, is funded by the French government. So actually, it's like the French government is biting its own tail, because as a result of this negative image that India gets in France, French businessmen are not so interested to invest in India because they think, oh, the caste problem, fundamentalism problem, women getting killed, oh, it's a dangerous country. Let me go to China instead. China is, in terms of human rights, is 100 times worse than India. But the entire West has gone to China and not come to India. So as a lover of India, I am telling the French, come to India. There are problems, but this country is democratic. There's a legal system. You can do business there. In the long term, it is much more safe than in China, because in China, who knows what's going to happen when the communist government, is removed by some, So India is a great country. If I have to conclude my talk, I need to conclude. It's great to be Indian, whatever the problem. Great to be Indian, and Indology needs so much to be done today. There is so much to be done in terms of research of the past, of changing the history books. So it's a great, great endeavor. And if you're young and if you want to do something useful, go into Indology. Thank you very much.